So this module and actually lecture is sort of a continuation of the previous one where you actually set up your database within the PHP MyAdmin interface. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how you're going to actually connect your PHP to your MySQL database and learn to perform like some database queries and um, retrieve dynamic data. So the learning objectives are to write PHP scripts to connect to a MySQL database, um, execute select queries to retrieve data and display database content dynamically on web pages. So we're going to kind of get into that. And this is going to probably be a long lecture because I want to take you step by step into actually creating these different queries and connecting to the database. So a query is a question or a request, and we can query a database, say, for specific information and then have a record set returned. So for instance, we're saying here that we want to select all columns from the table. And then where we have it, we have the table name here. So we replace the actual table name that we're querying. For instance, we've got that events table, we've got a users table, so we would actually put the name of the table here. And then this asterisk here, this character is used in place of saying all column names. So instead of listing out each column name separately, like we did in this one here, we would just put an asterisk. Or if there's specific column names that you don't want all column names to be returned, in that record set, then you would say select, and then you would list each column name separately, and then say from, and then whatever the table is. So this is the basic syntax of a select clause. Now, there's two ways of connecting to MySQL from PHP. One is using this MySQL I extension. The I stands for improved, and the other is to use PDO. Now you can use either of these to connect your PHP code to your MySQL database. Both of them have advantages. PDO is going to work on 12 different database systems, whereas MySQL I will only work with the MySQL databases. So if you have to switch your project to use a different database, then PDO is going to make the process a lot easier. You only have to change the connection string and say a few queries. Now we're going to be working with PDO because it's going to give us more flexibility. PDO is an acronym for PHP Data Objects. And it's a PDH extension that defines a lightweight and a consistent interface for accessing databases in PHP. Now, PDO provides various ways to work with objects and retrieves prepared statements that make, work much easier. Now, we'll be creating prepared statements. A prepared statement is a template for executing one or more SQL statements with different values. Now, it's highly efficient and it helps kind of protect the application against SQL injections. Now, an SQL injection attacks there when, say, malicious SQL statements are inserted into like an input query, to gain access to the database. Prepared statements enforce the separation between templated SQL and user supplied input. So instead of building up an SQL statement by, say, concatenating strings and user supplied input, prepared statements are constructed by using a parameterized SQL statement that has a placeholder token, and a list of values that should be used for that parameter. This is what we're going to be doing in this video for our demo. Now this is how we open and close as far as the connection to MySQL. And I'll explain this again, as we actually go through the demo. But first of all, we're going to be defining variables that contain our connection credentials. Okay. Next, we're going to be creating an array with PDO options that are either critically important or just kind of make the experience with PDO a lot better. So that's what we have here. Now, having these options and credentials set, we can finally proceed to creating our connection. Um, and to do so, we need to create an instance of the PDO class for which we're going to need to supply 4 parameters, of which the first one is going to be the DSN. Okay, that's going to be the most important. Now, the DSN is a semicolon delimiter string that consists of like say parameters equal like value pairs, and that begins from like the driver name and the colon. So we're going to be wrapping the creation of the PDO instance into a try catch statement in order to be aware of any possible errors, but without the risk of, say, revealing, say, the database credentials. If we didn't do that, the error may actually show like what the username is or something like that. Now, a MySQL connection will automatically close, as soon as, say, the current script is finished executing. The connection to the MySQL will only stay alive while, say, the PDO object still exists. So once your PHP script is finished, the PDO object is destroyed. Consequently, the connection that is associated with the PDO object will cease to exist. Now, PDO is capsulated, so without it, the connection that it holds will simply die off. A connection will only stay alive after the script has finished executing if you manually configure the PDO to create a persistent connection. So to manually close the PDO connection, you can assign a null value to the variable that holds the PDO connection or a PDO object, and that's what we're going to do. So again, just wanted to show you this, but we're going to do this step by step within the demo. So there's different type of statements that you'll use to actually interact with your database that covers that whole, CRUD acronym, the creation, the retrieval, the update, and the delete. Now you saw the retrieval, that was that select statement. Now this is the insert statement. And the insert into, I should say, statement is used to add new records to the MySQL table. Now, the parameters or the arguments for the insert statement consist of the table in which you want to insert the records to, the columns in the table to insert the values, and then the actual values that are going to be assigned to the column. They have to be inserted in the order that they appear. So, this one, second, third, first, second, third. So here's some other syntaxes to follow. The SQL query must be quoted in PHP. String values inside the SQL query must be in quotes. So if this was a string, then of course we'd have to have that in quotes. Numeric value must not be quoted. So if something is an integer, some kind of number, then it won't be quoted. Dates will be quoted, okay? And then the word no must not be quoted. So if you want it to be no, and we talked about different reasons why no, but then you would put the NULL. So in the course room, I'll also provide like the list of the different statements that would be utilized. But again, if you also look at the assignment, I've got some examples of how you're going to actually be creating your PHP in order to be able to do the insert, the update, the delete, and the select statements. So now what I want to do is show you a demo of how you're going to actually be doing some of the assignments I'm going to go through as far as selecting, using queries, as well as prepared statements. And I'm going to also show as far as an insert. I won't show as far as deleting and updating, but once you see how you would insert and select, you can be able to apply the same method to as far as being able to update and delete, looking at as far as the examples in the course room. So in the last module assignment, you created three tables in your MySQL database. Now today, or with this lecture, we're going to, or this demo rather, we're going to go through and work with the events table. Now, if you didn't get a chance to create your tables, please stop this video and refer to the previous recorded lecture in order to be able to create your tables. Now, I provided most of the code that you're going to be using for this assignment actually in the assignment, the different operations. But I wanted to take an opportunity to just kind of go through it a little bit, and just kind of walk you through it and explain some things so that you can be able to apply them to not just this scenario, but to any CRUD operation scenario. So from your dashboard, your Infinity dashboard, what you need to do, we're going to log into our account, or our the account that we created, and this is the account that I created. And what you want to do is you want to, if you didn't make note of like the different things like your username and password and host name and database name, you need to retrieve those, because we're going to be using those to make our connection within PHP. So if you go under MySQL databases, okay, you'll see the information there. So you need to copy this information, the username, the host name, whatever the password that you set up, and then the database that you're going to actually work with. So you need to take the time and copy those down, just so that you can have those. Okay. Um, and we'll also be coming back to this. There's a couple of other things I want you to look at, but once we get to those, we'll come back to this screen. So let's go back to the home screen. Okay, and we're going to click on File Manager because we're going to actually um, work with a file. We're going to create a PHP file, and that's what we're going to be using based on the assignment to complete our different connections and interactions with our database. Okay, so let's go ahead and expand MDocs, htdocs. And in this step, what we're going to do is we're going to create a PHP script that's going to connect to our MySQL database using the PDO, remember the PHP data objects extension. And this connection is going to allow us to interact with the database, be able to execute different queries, and to retrieve data. So we're going to go down here to New File, okay, and we're going to create a file, db underscore connection.php. It should allow us to create that. Okay, and this is our file. Now what I'd like to do is do an auto save because I never know when something may happen, especially when I'm working with remote. Okay, so let's start off by first adding our PHP tags. Okay, so everything that we do today is going to be enclosed within these PHP tags. And in this we're going to provide details for connecting, like I said, our database. Okay, so like when we discussed earlier, we're going to be using the PHP PDO class to pass in our database connections. We'll also pass in some optional flags to customize our database interactions. So let's first start off by creating an object constructor. Okay, and I like to do a lot of indents because as you get more code and things like that, these indents are going to kind of help as far as organizing your information. Okay, so I'm going to start off my PDO equals new PDO. Okay. Now, the first argument of a PDO class constructor is a string with three values that are separated by semicolons. The three values are the host information, the database name, and then the character set that you're going to use. Um, we're going to assign this to the connection object. So our host, as we saw when we captured that information, I'll go back to it here. When we captured that information, this is our host file. And this was, again, like I said, indicated here within the MySQL. The database name is going to be your database, or the DB name is going to be your database name file. And then the character set, this can be found by selecting your database, and then you look under operations and it'll show you like the collaboration in which the character set is used. So let me show you where you would actually find that. So if we go into our database, okay, we go under operations and it shows us here, this is the collaboration that we're using. Now, by default, I've noticed that Infinity uses a different one. It uses something else. I'm trying to remember what it was. But if yours doesn't say this, what you might want to do is you might want to change it so that it is using sort of like this general. This is what like most databases use. So there is an SQL um, um, command that you would use that would alter as far as the database. I'm going to put that in um, the course room, but let me show you exactly what you would type. So you'd say alter database, and then like whatever the database name is. So my database name um, is this here. Okay, so I'm altering that database, and then I'm going to say character set, and I'm going to say UTF-8MB4, and then collate UTF-8MB4 underscore, under 4, okay, underscore general CI. Okay, and so I would run this, and then what it would do is it would change my default character set to this. Okay, and then in that collate, I would see this. And then once you do the database, then you'll actually have to do the tables as well so that they default. And so then you would replace this with table, and then you would list out like your different tables. Now, what you want to do is you also can, once you do the default one, the database default one, and like I said, from that point on, it's going to change everything. You can also go into, I'm going to say, I want to leave this page, but I would run that, okay, so that it could change it. But what happens is it doesn't change existing ones, okay? So in order to change the existing ones, if you go into the actual table, and then you select operations, and here is where you would manually change it. Okay, so I'll leave some information about that, but what you want to use, like I said, is you want to use this generic one. This is what usually defaults. I'm not sure why Infinity is doing something different, but that's okay. We know how to get around that. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and add as far as the different parameters that I need to add, or my different values that I need to add for this connection object. Now, um, we're going to be adding a string value, so make sure that it's wrapped in like a double quote, and make sure that you don't put any spaces, around the equal signs that I'm going to show you. So to save time, I'm actually going to um, copy and paste because it would take me forever to type. Okay. And I mean, I've used double quotes and I've used single quotes. Um, I'm not really sure if it makes too much of a difference, but if it gives you an error with the double quotes, we'll see in a few minutes, then go ahead and use the single quotes. So again, what I've created is it's MySQL colon, then the host, and whatever the host name is, semicolon, DB name, and then whatever the database name is, and then character set. And like I said, if you've gone ahead and changed your character set, then this would be your character set based on like what I just showed you. Okay, and like I said, it automatically saves this, but I'm still going to go ahead and press the save button. Now, we can streamline the constructor by moving this first argument here into its own variable. Now, the next parameters are usually kind of unique to the user or to the application, but this particular string here, this doesn't change. It's always going to be, we're going to be connecting to, this host. We're always going to be connecting to this database name using this character set. Depending on, we might have different users depending on permissions and things like that that might change, but these don't change. So I'm going to move these to their own variable. Okay, and I'm going to call it DSN, which stands for data set name. So let me say DSN. Okay, and I'm going to say equals, and then I'm going to move this value from the constructor to that variable. Okay. Now, just so you know, this character set, this is optional. Okay, so if you don't want to go through the challenge of changing your collation, changing your character set, then leave this off. Okay, don't include the character set. But the thing is, the reason why I'm using it and the reason why I would probably recommend you use it is for security reasons. Because what we do is we declare the character set that we expect to use from, say, querying the database. Okay, so now that I've moved this to a variable, then I'm going to go ahead for the that first argument, of the PDO. I'm going to use the variable and place the variable in there. Okay. All right, so now let's add our other arguments. So the next argument is going to be the credentials to access the database. First is going to be the username, and then second is going to be the password. And you're going to put these in quotes separated by a comma. So let me go ahead and type those out. Okay, so gathering that from as far as the dashboard, I put in my username and my password. Now we can also move the credential values into variables. Um, it's really not practical to hardwire the username and password into the constructor like this, as maybe these values might come from like other sources. So let's pull them out and store them in variables as well. Okay, so I've stored these in their own variables. Now I'm going to replace the actual values with the variables. Okay. All right, now when you use a PDO object, the database connection runs until the end of the script, and then it implicitly closes. So therefore, it's not necessarily that you manually end the connection, but some developers kind of feel that this is good practice. So to close your connection after you do everything, or your database connection after you do everything, you'll need to add or set the constructor to no. So this will be towards the end. Okay, so that's why I put a few spaces. I'm just going to say my PDO equals null. Okay, and then everything else that I do is going to go in between this because this is the last thing. Once I finish connecting and everything else, then I'm going to close it. Okay. Now, when connecting to a database, say an error in typing a name or whatever can cause like a kind of an error in your page. So let me show you how that could happen. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Okay. And I'm going to grab my web page. This is my web page. Okay. That's my domain. And then, of course, the name of the file is db connection. So first of all, let me show you db underscore connection.php. Okay, that's my file. Okay, I don't have anything. I'm not asking it to display anything right now, so it's just going to be a blank page. But say if I made a mistake by adding something different here, like made a mistake in my password or made a mistake in my username, I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then when I refresh it, see it's giving me pages not working. It's not able to handle it because I had that one mistake in there. So this is cool for the development environment, like if you make a mistake and you get, that kind of page or whatever, but we don't want our viewers to see something like that, so we can substitute the error for more of a friendly one, by using a try code block. Now, the try code block only runs if, say, there are certain errors. And then the catch portion of the try code block, it catches the error and then it does whatever we tell it to do within that code block. Now, I'll provide some more information about as far as try code blocks, but we use these, like I said, to, say, try this, and if this doesn't work, then I want you to catch it. And then this, if it's an error, then I want you to display certain things. I want you to do certain things. Okay, so we're going to place this after actually, we're going to enclose our connection in this because what we want to do is we want to have it make the connection. And if there's an error in making that connection, using the constructor here, using that object, then that's when we want it to display the error. So whatever it is that you think is going to cause an error, that's what you put within that try part of the block. So I'm going to say try, okay, and then I'm going to take my connection and I'm going to move it in here, okay, and then I'm going to say catch PDO exception. That's the error that I want to catch if there's some kind of problem. And then what I want it to do is it's going to just echo out, or send a message that says an error has occurred. Okay, let's go ahead and I don't know why I keep wanting to go up there to the refresh button. So right now there's no error, but say let's put that error back in there that we had. Okay, and we come back here And see, instead of giving us that kind of ugly, thing, then it gave us exactly what we told it to give us. So you can kind of customize with this. You can customize as far as the errors that you want to display so that you're not getting, like I said, if you're in development mode, then yeah, you might want to get like whatever error the browser is going to give you. But, once you kind of publish it and you have like your outside users using it, you don't want to display like errors that aren't helpful to them or that aren't, say, user friendly. Now, in the catch function of this block code, we had to pass in an error reporting class. Now, this PDO exception, this is an error class that's designed for the PDO class. Along with the error class, we also passed in a variable here to catch the error. And the error class determines like what type of error we want to catch. And then the variable here basically stores the error so that we can process it. Okay. So now you can call this variable, whatever you want. Okay. Um, what this clause is telling us is to catch some error type into the variable E and then do something with it. So the error is an object with properties and methods like we learned, classes can have. Now, one method is called the get message method, which we can use to actually get the message that is stored in the variable here. Okay, so let's have the message returned instead of our custom message that we have here. So let's change this and let's say message, and we're going to have a line break, and then um, we're going to include, add it to the variable, okay, and then return the method that's part of that variable. Oh, sorry. Okay, let me just make sure I type this correctly. Hopefully you can see this. I'm not really sure how to enlarge this without causing too many issues with my computer. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save that. Okay, so let's go ahead and add an error message again. Okay, and then let's refresh it. Okay, and so now it's telling us that the access is denied for this user using password. Yes, so it kind of gives us that's the method. That's in there. That's the message that actually got stored, within that variable. Okay, so it just gives us a little bit more information, but we may not want, for us, we want to see that information because before, remember, it was just giving me that generic, not the one that I created, but the generic browser information. But when I'm testing, I may want to actually see what the message is, or I may want to take that message and then say convert it to a more user-friendly message. Or we could, go back to like what we had said before that there was a problem or something like that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take that off. Okay, and then save it. Okay, it automatically save. Okay, so next we can set some database interaction options by passing a fourth argument to the PDO constructor. And this argument is an array of options. And we add this array like after the credentials. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and type that out. And again, I think I provided this within the course room. Let's see. Yeah, so I provided, let's see, the connection. Maybe I didn't. So I'll provide this as far as the argument with the array of options. I'll provide it in the course room as well if you decide that you want to use it. So give me a minute. Let me type this out. Okay, so here are the options here, and of course I stored it within a variable. And then now let's add the array to the PDO object. So, oops, my options. Okay. Now the description of these, the first one kind of and throws exceptions. The second one returns like an array indexed by column name. The third one indicates to use more of a the native prepared statement. Now, the detailed explanation of these is kind of out of scope, but I'll provide a link in the resources section where you can kind of research these a little further. Um, you can also set these using like a set attribute method, but this is a lot easier to me to do. Okay. Now, if you didn't add any data to your tables in the previous module, um, to either like the events table or the user table or the registration table, then go ahead and pause this and take time to insert some of the data. You can use either like an SQL command or you can use a database, um, the database interface. So I'm going to show you real quick how you could go ahead and do that. I did save this, right? Okay. So I'm going to add it to as far as the events. I can come back into this. I'm going to go SQL. Okay, maybe I need to come out. Let's go back in. Okay. Sometimes things time out or things like that, and so you have to kind of go back in. This is where, again, you're going to be checking to make sure that you've got that collation if that's what you choose to change it. This tells me that all of these tables are using this same collation and that that character set that I selected is using that. Okay. All right, so if you don't have any data, you can either, like I said, go into each table and manually add it. I have some data, but I'm going to show you what you would use to go in. Now you got to be kind of careful. There's a difference between as far as um, the quote, the single quote, and then a ticky mark. Okay. So when we list the table name and we list the column names, we're not using quotes. We're using like the either the ticky marks or maybe don't use anything. I'm gonna do the one not using anything. That's probably the most simplest. We'll test it and see. Sometimes, depending on how they have like the MySQL configure, it may require it. But I just don't want you to get mixed up. The only time you use a quote is when you're inserting like a string as far as a value. Okay, so let's see if we don't have to use them here. So I'm going to say insert into events. I'm going to insert a name. I'm going to insert into the data column, and I'm going to insert into the location column. And the values that I'm going to insert are going to be Candy Fundraiser. That's my one event. Um, the date that I'm going to have it, and it kind of this one is a little whatever they have configured, it is a little funny about the date, so you have to kind of use this date format. Okay, now these I'm using a quote, a quote. Okay, not the ticky mark, but the quote. And when I'm talking about the ticky mark, it's if you've got like the regular keyboard, it's the one that's just to the left of the one. It's the lower one that's under the tilde. So it's just left of the one on the keyboard. But I don't think that we're going to need them. So let's just kind of um, okay. All right, so if you need to pause, go ahead, but this is just a basic insert into events. I'm inserting into the name, date, and location the values of, and I'm going to put a space. I don't know if that's going to make a difference, but I'm going to put a space there. And these are the values that I'm going to insert in there. And so I'm just going to hit go. Okay, so obviously it did take it. Okay, so if I go to structure, and I go to events, now I see that that event listed there. Okay, so make sure you have some events because we're going to be kind of working with some events with this. Okay, so now we're ready to query our database within the SQL. I mean within the PHP. Now there's two ways to run a query in using PDO. um, Running queries with PDO query method, which is used when you don't have, like, say, any variables, or using a prepared statement, which offers protection against SQL injections. So we're going to be using a prepared statement for our demo. But I will show you an example of using the query method, just so that you know it, okay? So in our try statement, let's call the query method from the myPDO object, and then pass the variables to, or pass the results to a variable called SQL, which we can then use that result for something. Okay, so we're going to add this to our try block, after we've declared our PDO object. Okay, so I'm going to say, I'm going to put the variable that I want to hold the results in, and then I'm calling the myPDO dash greater than, and I'm using the query method, and I'm saying select all from events. Okay, now this query method takes our statement as its argument, and then queries the database and then returns the results to the variable SQL here. Okay, now what the method returns is a PDO statement object, but the return statement still needs to be executed. Okay, so we can use some of the other methods available to the PDO statement object in order to be able to do this. So to retrieve and display the data from the statement, we can use the fetch method and then loop it to display, like, each row. So let me go ahead and type that. Okay, so I've added a loop so that we could display each row. So the fetch method grabs the next row from the result set. So while there are rows to fetch, the loop is going to run and then display the content of the row. Okay. The temporary variable here, row, you can call that anything, but it just makes sense to me to call it this. So what we're telling it is that, while, there is something to fetch, while there's still, something in the results set, go ahead and go to each row in the results set, and then what you're going to do is create, you're going to print this out, echo, you're going to create a paragraph, you're going to create the name, and then you're going to, add that to the dash, have a dash there, add that. You remember that's what the dots mean. So we're like combining strings, okay? We're combining information. Um, Concatenate is what they talk about, that it actually represents. And then we're printing out the location that's part of that row, and then we're ending the paragraph. So let's go ahead and save that. Let's go here and let's refresh. Okay, we got an error, so let's see why we got that error. Okay, select from events. Let me take a look at this. Okay, I think I've narrowed down what my error message is. So sometimes when I get an error message and I'm not sure exactly why I'm getting the error message, I'll start commenting out certain parts of my script just to see if it'll run without the error message. So it tells me that this is the message is appearing in here because when I go to run it, I don't get a message. And then I realize that I actually forgot to put the quotes around as far as what the row names are. Okay, so let's do that. And then I'm going to take my comment out. This is how we comment a line. We put a double quote. So let me go ahead and save that. And let's see if it'll run now. Okay, it's not showing it now. I do have stuff in the database, so it should run it. It is still saving. Okay, let's see what else we've got going on here. Okay, to be honest with you, I'm not sure what happened. It's like after a while, maybe it takes some time to make the connection or something. I have no clue as to why all of a sudden now it's running. So maybe it took time for the server to actually catch up with what I had actually put in here. So if that happens to you and you know you've written the right code, one of the things you can do is just especially write something kind of like this just to kind of test it out. I don't know if things had cached or what was going on, and then that'll, you'll see it. Um, there's all kind of ways, like I said, that I test, just to see um, what's going on with my code. Okay, save that. Okay, so we're good now. So, like I said, this is going to allow us to be able to view as far as the different things that are in our database. And again, this is using that query, so this way is fine. And it works if our query is static, but if you have like a dynamic query where we would need to create like placeholders um, and then bind them to an argument, then we may want something else. Now, like if I wanted to say select a record with a specific ID, that would be dynamic, and that means that's going to come from somewhere else. This is pretty static. I'm saying select all from the event, so it's pretty static. So I'd be safe with that. But if I'm pulling, again, if I'm using some kind of parameter, and I wanted to have a dynamic query, and I would need to create like a placeholder and then bind that to the argument, then that's where I want to be a little bit more secure, because that information may be coming from the outside or whatever the case is, and I want to make sure that that information is properly vetted when it comes in. So, for example, we could add to the previous query here where a where statement in order to be able to like pull specific records. So, for instance, up here I could say where ID is equal to 1. Okay, and then go ahead and save that, and it should only pull probably the first record. Okay, which is that first record there. Okay, now if you aren't familiar with SQL, this where statement here, this where clause is used to filter records. It's used to extract only those records that fulfill like a specific condition. So it's helpful when selecting and updating and deleting like specific records. Now, while again, this method does work, it isn't really safe and it's not real practical. So instead, what we do is we use a placeholder, and I'll first replace the actual ID with a placeholder of a question mark, and then utilize the prepared statement to let the PDO object prepare and sanitize the ID before the query is actually processed. So let me go ahead and change this out here. from this query statement to using a prepared statement. Okay, so I've changed that to prepare, and then I'm using, a placeholder for, instead of actually typing in hard coding that one in, I'm using a placeholder so that I can this is more dynamic, where I can feed anything into this. It's not just hard coded to look for ID of one. So again, like I said, this prepared method here, it's going to set the query to accept dynamic input. Now, this method does two things. It prepares the statement and it returns an object. Now, the object is an instance of the class PDO statement, which offers us multiple methods that we can use. Now, one is the execute method. So after preparing, we use this method to execute the query and then pass the value that the placeholder is holding the place for. Okay, so let me do that. Okay, so here I'm using the execute method and then passing the value. Okay, so I want to say where the ID is equal to 3. Now notice it's entered as an array of possible placeholders. That's what these brackets are. Now so far we only have one element, but say we might have others which they might either be numeric or string. Now we manually kind of added the ID directly as an argument, okay, here. But in reality, this might be passed as a variable coming, say, from somewhere else. So let's create a variable for this ID number instead. Okay, so I've created a variable that's going to actually hold as far as what I wanted that value. And then let's now pass the variable to the execute method as an array element. So let's replace the 3 with the variable. Okay. Now using this technique, because we're using a question mark as a placeholder here, we have to be careful when we say list the variable values in the execute method. Now, when there are multiple like question marks, like if we had, say, multiple things that we were querying for, then the values have to be inserted sequentially. So, whatever the first one is, and then like if we say ID equals this and name equals this, and we use question marks to represent both of those variables, then we'd have to make sure that whatever we have in here has to be sequential. Okay. So let's improve this technique so that we don't have to really kind of worry about that. And what we're going to do is we're going to replace the question marks with named placeholders. Okay, so before we do that, let's go ahead and run this just so we can make sure that whenever I code, I try to run things a little bit just to make sure that I don't have an error message. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so it's pulling that third one. So that's what we wanted it to do. Okay. Now, if we use a named placeholder, we prefix it with a colon in the prepared method argument, and then we assign it as a key to the values in the execute method. Okay, so for instance, instead of the question mark here, I'm going to insert a placeholder, and like I said, you have to prefix it with a colon, and then this is going to be ID. That's the variable that I'm using, or the key that I'm using. Okay, and then down here, I have to actually assign it as a key to the value in the execute method. Okay, so I'm going to put that in my quote. Okay, so I'll move that out the way so you can see that. Okay, notice how the named placeholder, like I said, is going to be prefixed with the colon. And then the name is passed to the execute array argument as a string value. Okay, that's how we put the quotes around it. So this is showing a single row. Okay, we're showing a single row here. But if we want to select all rows, say using the prepared statement, we would just simply remove the where clause, and then empty out the array, in the execute method. Okay, so we just empty out that array. If we wanted to go back to the original where we were selecting all from the events, we'd take the where clause off and we'd empty out the array. Okay. All right. So now that we know how to, and I'll show you what that looks like just so that you know. So again, we want to kind of use these prepared statements. Okay. So I'm going to empty out the array. All right. And it should show me everything. So let's just kind of make sure of that we don't have any errors. Okay, good. All right. So now that we know how to retrieve data, let's look at how we would insert data using our PHP code. Now, like I mentioned, I did provide some code within your assignment. So for insert, for read, for updates, and just some example code. I'm going to show you how to do an insert, and then, like I say, you can kind of adapt it to as far as how the update and how the delete is going to work as well. Okay, so let's start off by declaring two variables or three variables rather for storing the data, for a new event record. And we're going to do this in the try block. Now, before we do that, I don't want you to, because this is what this page or this file here, that's what you're going to actually upload for your assignment. And I want to see that you actually kind of went through as far as doing inserts and things like that. So, once you do your insert, once you kind of do like these different scripts here, then what I want you to do is you're going to comment out that portion of the script so that it doesn't try to execute. Oops. When you're running, say, I'm getting ready to run my insert script and I don't want this select statement to execute. So I'm going to comment it out. I don't want you to delete it. So whatever you kind of redo, just comment it out because I want to be able to see, how, like for instance, how you actually selected, how you did your select statement, that type of thing. Okay. If you have any questions about that, reach out to me. But what I'm going to do is and you can do this too for every, part of the assignment, put a comment in, that says what you're going to do. Like for instance, you're going to create, you're going to do an insert data. So, maybe put that in as a comment, put the read as a comment, those different things. So, and then you put the code below it so that I'm able to look at your code and I can see, especially if you run into issues, I can look at your code and kind of help you to see like what the problems are. Okay, so I'm going to declare my variables that are going to store the data for a new event. Okay, so let me go ahead and type that. I type slow, so that's why I keep kind of going off camera so that you don't have to wait for me to type. Okay, so I've added my three variables that are going to hold as far as the values that I want to insert into as far as my new event record. Okay, so go ahead and do that. Make sure that, again, because these are variables in PHP, we want to make sure that we have the $sign in front of them. And dates, just kind of check your date format. And a date is kind of considered a string in this. So we're going to go ahead and put those in a quote. Okay, so the next thing is to prepare an insert statement with placeholders. Now, the insert statement um, in the examples, we actually store that in a variable by itself. So whatever the select or the insert, whatever the statement is, we actually store that within a variable itself, and then we call that variable, within the prepared statement. I'm not going to do that, so you can do it either way. Whichever way you want to do it. I'm just going to actually, within the prepared statement, I'm going to actually have my insert statement as an argument within that, okay? But like I said, either one will work. It's just so many variables and things like that. Typing is going to be quite a bit. So let me go ahead and type that out. Okay, Nick, I got most of it. Like, this is the statement. This insert statement is similar to like what we did when we inserted an extra row within directly within MySQL. And I kind of left this blank right now, because remember, just like we did up here, when we deleted it, but when we did up here, we had placeholders. Instead of having like the question mark as the placeholder, we actually had named placeholders. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to create some named placeholders. And just so that we don't get kind of mixed up with our different variable names, I'm going to kind of construct them a little different than just having like, ename, edate, elocation, but I'm going to do it in a way that so that you can be able to differentiate which one is actually the placeholder, the named placeholder, and which one is actually the variable. Okay, so remember, the named placeholders have to start with they have to be prefixed with a column within the prepared statement or the prepared method argument. Okay, so this one's going to be E, and I'm going to capitalize um, the N, and then we've got E date, and then E location. All right, so remember, these are our named placeholders. That's why I kind of made them look a little different than my actual variables. And then make sure that when you place them within the prepared method, that you're using prefixing them with the colons. Okay. And again, these placeholders are used for the values because that's where the dynamic data is going to be inserted. Okay, so next we're going to execute the prepared statement, and then we're going to tell it, just like we did here, give it that array of this this named placeholder should equal this variable. This named placeholder should equal this variable. This named placeholder should equal this variable. So I'm going to go ahead and type that out. Okay, so my execute, remember, we're putting this in an array, and we're saying that the placeholder ename, okay, and remember, we got to put it in quotes, is going to be equal to the variable ename. Edate, okay, is going to be equal to edate, and location, so on and so forth. So like I said, I kind of try to differentiate the names, and you may want to do the same thing just so that you don't get kind of mixed up, because sometimes all of these, if they have like the same kind of spelling and things like that, it can kind of get a little mixed up. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save that, and I'm not going to run it yet. Because I want to manually check to see that the record was added, um, which we will, but I want to show you another method as well, to, we, like I said, we can go, and just like we did before, we can look at the database, we can say, oh, okay, yeah, it got added. Okay, but I'm going to show you another method. And this method is called last insert ID. And this is we can use this to test an entry by retrieving like the last ID. Okay, so let's add that code before actually viewing our page. So this is after it's executed, after we've gone ahead and executed everything. Then what we want to do is we want to retrieve the last ID updated. Okay, and so we're going to store that in a variable called ID, and it's my PDO. We're using that, and again, like I said, the method is called last insert ID. So we're going to grab that and put it in that variable, and then we want to echo out that variable. Okay. Now there's several reasons why we want to do this. So for example, to return the data back to the user directly from the database, that may be one reason. So, we would use the ID variable to say then perform a select statement, okay? Or we might, need to say use that ID to put it in another table. Like if we have two tables that have some kind of like relationship, and so we need to use that ID to add data to another related table, and we need to use it as a foreign key. So there's different reasons why we might want to grab that ID. Again, like I said, it may even just be to the point of, okay, I want to show them not just the ID of what got inserted, but you may want to create, this select statement, where, ID equals to as far as this. So again, there's different reasons why. So let's go ahead and save this and kind of cross our fingers that this code works, because we got a lot of code going on here. Okay, did not work. So let me see what the problem is. Okay, so for one thing, I can tell you it did not get added to my database. So that tells me that the issue is up here. So let's take a look at what's going on up here. Okay, I think that I found the problem. I didn't have a semicolon behind this when I typed it. So let's see. That's the only thing about PHP. It's like you definitely have to make sure that you've got the semicolons at the end of the lines so that it knows. So I'm going to save that, and let's try running it again. Okay, so yeah, so that was it. I didn't have the semicolon. So again, just, be kind of careful, with that, examine your code, make sure. So what it's telling me is that the last ID that I updated was 5. So I can go in here and I can refresh, and there, the last thing that I updated was 5. Okay, so again, that's a way that we can be able to tell. Now, you may have one other thing I just want to let you know is that you may have maybe a timestamp. I don't think that we created anything with a timestamp, but if we did create something with a timestamp, a lot of these free systems, Infinity Free, they don't allow you to be able to change the time zone for the free plan. So, don't worry if you did a timestamp and it doesn't really show the correct time or anything like that. There is a function that we could use as a method to be able to convert it, convert the time before we display it. I'll put a link to it. But other than that, don't worry about if your timestamp is not accurate. Like again, some of these free plans don't allow for that. Now, one other thing I want to show you is concerning inserting text with literal HTML tags in your database. For example, you might create a blog, that allows the user to enter HTML tags, like the paragraph tag, the bold tag, those different things, or whatever. Now, the text will be entered correctly in the database, but when we are reading it back to the browser, the HTML engine is going to act on that tag and make whatever the text is bold instead of actually showing you the tag. Okay, now this could be dangerous depending on like what was actually entered. So in order to prevent this, we use a PHP string function called HTML special characters after querying the database. And what it does, it converts like any special characters into HTML entities. Um, so for example, like I said, I'm not sure if we're going to be needing to do anything like that here, but an example would be we would use it as, like I said, it's a function. So instead of just calling name row, say this was one, or location, say location was one that we might have inserted some kind of like HTML or something like that, then what we would type is right before row, we would call the function HTML special characters, and then place this, of course, because it's a function, we would place it within a paragraph. Now, like I said, this is if you're doing some kind of blog, if you're allowing for like, if you need to allow the user to enter like HTML tags. I think in the examples that we're doing for our class, we're not really doing that. But if you need to do that, then you can go ahead and use this. And I'll put a link to more information about that. But you would use this function, to convert whatever this value is, and using this so that you're able to convert the special characters into like HTML entities. Okay. All right, now I'm not going to demo updating and deleting, but like I said, I provided some examples, of how you would be updating, and just kind of follow the same way that we did with the insert, as far as updating, and if you need a refresher, if you're not familiar with databases, like I said, this isn't really a database class, but I will provide some information, some links as far as, writing like an update query. Okay, just so that you understand what this is. Basically, briefly, all we're saying is if we need to update the table, we say update, and then we say whatever the table is, and then we set whatever the values are that we want to update. So we're updating these different values to whatever the new value is going to be. So we're saying we're updating name to be whatever the new value is going to be. We're updating date to be whatever the new date value is going to be. We're updating location to whatever the new location value is going to be. But when you're updating, you want to make sure you have a where statement, because you don't want to update everything in your database. So you need to call out like which record you're actually updating. And just like we did before, that's where this where statement is. The same for the delete. For delete, you don't have to tell it like each column to delete. You just say delete from events, but you need to make sure that when you're deleting that you tell it which record to delete, or else it's going to delete everything. You have to have a where clause. Okay, and then everything else, we've seen this in action. We've seen that with the demo that I just showed you. Okay, now like I said, the only thing else that I wanted to mention is that we write our DB connection code directly. What we did was we wrote it actually directly within the web page. So when we did our web page here, we wrote our DB connection code directly in there. And that's okay for the assignments, for this class, but it's best practice to basically kind of put them in a separate file, and then you would use the include to include that file in whatever pages you needed to connect to the database. So therefore you only got one place that you're going to make changes, say to your connection, okay? And then you're including that in every page that needs to connect to the database. But in our project, we're not going to complicate things, so we're going to go ahead and just keep it within the actual page that we're creating. So again, go ahead and you're going to do the update and you're going to do the delete. Don't forget to comment out the section, for the insert, and then you're going to start a new section, that says, update record, and then you'll put the code, for updating record. And then when you go to run that and that runs properly, then go ahead and comment all of that out, and then do another one for your delete record. And then you're going to so that I can be able to, even though it's delete, I mean, it's commented out, I can still see what your code is. And if you run into any problems, reach out to me, share your code, share it with me. But you're going to go ahead and you'll save this, and then you'll upload it to the course room. You're going to zip it up first because it's a PHP. I don't want there to be any problems with pulling it up. So once you get your PHP file downloaded, then you're going to go ahead and you'll zip it up, and then you'll upload it. Now, so all we have to do now is we'll just close this out. And then this is the file that I want to say submit once I finish everything. So if I click on it, all I do is say download. Okay. And then it'll download it. I've never done this create zip archive. You can try that. And it probably will zip it up automatically, and you don't have to zip it after you download it. But I always like to download the files just so that I can be able to pull them up like in Word, not Word, but in Notepad, just so that I can see my code. But like I said, just make sure that you download this. You're not going to submit the page because I'm not going to really be able to see the code, just looking at this page. So I need to actually see your PHP file. So you're going to be submitting your PHP file. Like I say, either download it and zip it, on your computer, or try out this create zip archive, see if it'll zip it up, and then let's see if we can do that. Okay, so um, I don't know if it's zipping everything, um, so that's the reason why I'd rather, and I don't know. Let's just go ahead and just download, and then, like I said, then zip it separately so that you don't have any problems and things like that. But other than that, that's this lecture. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I look forward to looking at your file. And happy coding.